All right. Thank you for joining us on the next hour of the 24-hour Two-Rolling with Logic charity event for Engineers Without Borders. I am Big Lundy. I'm going to be hosting with Angry Pumpkin today. And our guest for this hour is the illustrious YouTuber Steve Shives.
Ha!
See, the modesty in this man. Modesty.
Hi, everybody.
Pleasure to be here. Have Steve as a part of a charity because he's just one of those faces that makes you go, I want to give money to whatever cause he supports.
Yeah, exactly.
Literal baby back rib barbecue. You'd still give it to it because it's the beard.
Yeah,
it's the beard and the cap. It's the combo.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Steve.
Yes, sir.
How's your day?
It's been pretty good so far. I just had a Bloody Mary with my wife about 15 minutes ago, so I'm about half lit, which is always good. That's good. So let's raise some money for charity.
5 o'clock was 23 hours ago.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Steve, you do a lot of work on YouTube. I'm always impressed with how consistent you are in pumping out like video after video after video about so many different things. One of the things that I really enjoy watching you do is your dissection of apologist books. You've done a decent amount of them. Right now, you're on Ray Comfort. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, and you're saying that it's probably the most difficult to get through just because of how much bullshit is packed into it. Could you just kind of like lead us through the process here?
Well, I mean, until I started doing this one, the worst book, the most worthless book that I had done was The Purpose-Driven Life. That book is just a huge waste of time. Like, there's no reason anybody should even read that. But Ray Comfort makes that book look like, I don't even know, like the Odyssey or something. I mean, Ray Comfort's writing is so bad, and his arguments are so stupid. Like, we were talking earlier before we went on the air, like, if you don't know anything about the subjects that he's talking about, if you don't know anything about evolution, if you don't know anything about history, or even like logic and philosophy, which I'm by far from an expert on, but then some of it might sound good. You know, like he makes arguments like his evolution argument that I mentioned in the most recent video that I put up in that series. You know, well, if evolution is true, then who did the first human mate with to make more humans? If there was only one first human, wouldn't that have been the last first human? And if you don't know anything about evolution, that might sound like kind of a good argument. But if you know even a little bit, like if you took like Bio 101, or if you've read like any popular science book about evolution at all, you know that's not how it works, and you can see right through that argument. So it's not just like preaching to the choir, it's preaching to the dumbest people in the choir and assuming that everybody in the choir is as dumb as the dumbest people. It's really like, I mean, at first it was really frustrating. Now I've kind of gotten into it. It's not nearly as bad as it was. I've kind of gotten into my groove, and I know what to cut out and what to talk about, and it's pretty much the same as the other ones. But man, for that first episode, I mentioned to you, Lundy, before we talked, before we got on the air, the rough cut of the first episode of that Ray Comfort series was almost an hour and a half long, because there was just so much shit to deal with, and I had to sort of sort it out and cut it down to under an hour, because I'm like, there's no way I'm putting up a 90-minute video about me reading a Ray Comfort book. But yeah, so it's been pretty rough.
So how drunk do you need to be to do those? I've always been curious.
You need to get at least a little tipsy before you delve into the book.
Actually, I mean, it's weird. Like, I write them the day before I shoot them, so I'm like reading the book and writing it pretty much all day. And sometimes I'll have a drink here and there to kind of take the edge off, or I'll get up and do something else and take a break and then come back to it. But actually, when I shoot them, because they're so long and they take a long time to edit and then to upload, I've been shooting them for this series. I've been doing them like first thing in the morning. So it's like, wake up, get a cup of coffee, take a shower, and then get in front of the camera and talk about Ray Comfort for like an hour. So if I were drinking while I was doing it, I would be like an alcoholic by now. I'd be drinking as soon as I got out of bed.
If that doesn't sound like the most fun thing to do on any night, I'm going to get in the camera, I'm going to talk about Ray Comfort. About that.
Yeah.
I think that's the type. I think that'd be around about the time your friends start getting their eulogies ready. It's like, yeah, he's gone already. So what are you gonna say? I don't know.
We told him not to do the Ray Comfort book. We tried to tell him.
So you talk about the religious books. I guess obviously it's kind of a misnomer to ask you which one you find the most persuasive, because if it was persuasive, you probably accept the fact that God exists. But which of all the books you've done so far, which one would you say is the best written? I suppose the one that makes you think the most.
Oh, well, that's easy. The best written one is Mere Christianity. That was actually the second one that I ever did by C.S. Lewis. And the arguments in it aren't really any better, but they're not. I mean, well, they're better than the Ray Comfort arguments. I'll put it that way. They're better than the Ray Comfort arguments because C.S. Lewis doesn't actually say as much that is like blatantly false. Like Ray Comfort says shit that is just there's no argument about it. It's not like a philosophical difference of opinion. It's like he says stuff that is just wrong, just flat out false. And C.S. Lewis doesn't do that as much. And the writing is a lot better. I mean, one of the things about all of the apologist books that I've done, except for Mere Christianity, is that they're all totally aside from the arguments being used, like just stylistically, mechanically, they're just so poorly written. They're just, all these guys are just really, really bad writers. And C.S. Lewis, even though I'm not like a huge fan of C.S. Lewis's writing in general, like I was never a big fan of like Chronicles of Narnia or any of that stuff, but he is a competent writer. He can write, he can express himself and be articulate, and he knows how to write. And so, I mean, the further I get away from that book, the better it looks. Like, I haven't read it since I finished that series, but the more other apologist books that I read, the better fucking Mere Christianity looks in the rearview mirror. Like, wow, wasn't that one a nice one? You know?
I wish we could have another one like one. See,
Yeah.
it's funny to me because in the 20th century, there was sort of a resurgence of Christian philosophers that were writing books trying to justify different tenets of Christianity itself. Within the purview of both academia as well as the public view. And most of them, I would say, were usually very well written. Not just C.S. Lewis, but Kierkegaard was definitely one of my favorites to actually read. And even my favorite philosopher in general, Wittgenstein, borrowed a lot, like even when he's not in any way talking about religion, he still uses that sort of symbolic language to try and get whatever point he's talking about across, because it was just so effective and it was so poetic and it was very interesting to read. These days, I just feel like there's just such a lack of any of that. There's such a dry nature to so many Christian apologist books at this point, where it just feels like there's so much recycling going on, and very little original points being made.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, one of the fears I have about the series going forward is that it'll just be me just responding to the same arguments over and over and over again. Because I've encountered a little bit of that already. And I mean, someone left a comment on one of the recent videos because I mentioned how there was a particular modern apologist trope that Ray Comfort has so far avoided in the books that I've done of his, and that is the anecdote about the time that you had an argument with a professor at a prestigious Ivy League university, which they all seem to have a story like that, where he was a professor of philosophy or a professor of biology at a prestigious Ivy League university, and we were talking after his class, and I asked him, well, do you really think that all of this came out of an accident or whatever? They asked some stupid question that anybody who was actually a philosophy professor at Harvard or whatever would actually have a proper answer to. And they're like, oh, he was totally stumped. He admitted that he couldn't answer that question. And so far, Ray Comfort hasn't done that. But someone asked me, well, could you make a list of like all these tropes that apologists use? And I probably could at this point. I mean, they all do that. They all tell that story, or most of them tell that story. Most of them they misunderstand evolution, to make it sound like it's a completely accidental process where there's no guiding force in it at all. and they make it sound like every organism evolves from scratch, totally by chance. And they do repeat the same arguments, and they all have the same answer for the infinite regress argument. Like atheists usually say, well, if God made everything, then who made God? And they all have the same answer for that, which is, well, nobody made God, which gets them out of the infinite regress. It sort of cuts that off. But then you have the problem of, okay, well, you still haven't said what, you can't account for God. You can define him and say, well, okay, nobody made God. Okay, fine, that's great, whatever. Well, how can you account for him? The fact that he doesn't have a beginning doesn't really alter the real problem of that, which is, where does God come from? And if he doesn't come from anywhere, well, what's he doing here? What's his nature? What can account for him? And so they all repeat these same arguments over and over again. And some of the arguments, like a lot of them are just variations on the Quinque Viae from Thomas Aquinas that people have been passing back and forth for like 500 or 600 years now. So there's a lot of repetition.
I've always seen that the topic of, whenever someone says, well, where did God come from? They say, oh, he's been around forever. It gets rid of the infinite regress, but to me, it's kind of like it's seeing the never-ending serpent, cutting it at a point, and then there's this dangling limb, which is basically God. You could cut that away and just say, okay, well, the universe has just been here. There was nothing before it. It's kind of gets rid of the infinite regress, but when I never get why they don't take it the step further, if that makes any sense.
I kind of see where you're coming from on that. It's sort of like the Sagan point that he made, where if God's allowed to be infinite, it cannot the universe. And I'm not going to pretend that I understand the science as far as like Big Bang cosmology goes, and how exactly we come to the conclusion as to whether or not the universe actually exists or not. But I do know that the premise too of the Kalam cosmological argument that the universe began to exist is generally not too much of a contested premise. It's generally something that's accepted. So I don't know what the science is, but I do know the consensus appears to be that's true, at the very least.
Yeah, and a lot of the argument about that argument, like when people make the Carl Sagan response and say, well, why not just assume that the universe doesn't need to be created, instead of postulating an uncreated God and creating an extra step. The response from most apologists today who have embraced the Big Bang would be to say, but we know that the universe did begin to exist, because cosmology tells us that, all the observational evidence points to a Big Bang at some finite point in the past. So, but then you get in, you sort of run around deciding, well, yeah, but what do you really mean by the universe? Or do you mean the universe, or do you mean reality itself? And then you can say, well, instead of saying that there was a God that created the universe, why not just assume that there is some ultimate reality that what we know of as the universe, that which began with the Big Bang, resides in, is a part of, and that was the uncreated bit. I mean, no matter how you play with it and sort of tinker with the philosophy of it and change what you mean by a universe, or whether you're talking about our universe or the reality that our universe exists in, or whatever, it still is always simple to assume that things, if you're going to assume that something didn't need to be created, just assume that it was here to begin with. Don't assume that there was some incredible conscious omnipotent being that was here to begin with that then made everything. That's just an unnecessary step, no matter which way you try to massage it,
That's, I completely agree. Right now, before we continue, I'd like to point out, currently the charity has raised $1,832, which is absolutely fantastic. We're still going up, and I hope we continue to go up. Every hour, we're going to try and give you guys a little bit of incentive to try and donate a little bit more. Right now, I'd say, if this is fair, the next $50 donation, Steve will be Stuffy on, and we'll have a conversation with Stuffy, because Stuffy has some very interesting political views, that I do think will be interesting for the broadcast. So next $50 donations, Stuffy will be brought on as a special guest. And next $100 donation, I will bring up a random piece of erotic fan fiction and have Steve read it out loud for you.
Oh, that'll be awesome.
That sounds all right with you guys.
If I might, I have a little idea of something we could do, but does require a bit of a helping hand from you two. If we beat our goal and get up to $2,000, how would you react to
having a confession with Father Peter O'Phil? A very sultry and dirty confession.
Oh, I'd be absolutely ecstatic about having that.
We can do that.
So if we break 2,000, then we are going to have a fun, sultry confession with Father Phil.
Father Peter O'Phil.
Peter O'Phil.
Peter O'Phil.
You can call me Peter File if you want.
Because having a first name that is also synonymous with penis is the greatest name for a priest ever. So, moving on, I guess. One of the other things, a particular video that I saw on your channel, I can't remember which number it was, but it was one of your basically just one of your talk videos where you're just kind of expressing random thoughts. You delved into how Batman, at the very least, seemed to shape how you view life, helped you figure out your current philosophy, and in a number of different ways. And it's always interesting to me how like little things like fiction can always affect somebody that drastically. But one of the points you made, which I thought was very interesting, is that whatever someone's view is on Batman, for instance, or any superhero or any fictional character in general, is going to be their idealized view. It's not going to be the one objective view. It's just going to be the one idealized view that works for them.
Right.
And I just think back on every single nerdy argument I've ever had with somebody, and I'm just like, that will never work in an actual argument, because every one of them will say, but he did this in this comic, and therefore... So that's just something that kind of struck me a little bit, but I also agree with it in so many ways. And in the same way, I think that can be applied to just about any view that anyone has of anyone in history. You only get so many different facts about someone in history. There is an objective fact as to what people did, but it does not save them from being idealized by a substantial portion of the population, as far as wherever their political or philosophical leanings go. Like, for instance, John F. Kennedy has like 1 million different views as to whether or not he was even a good person or if he was like a terrible devil of a person. And it's just funny to me because we have established history as far as historical figures go, but at the same time, so many people go, but my view on this person is different from your view, based off of nothing more than actually just focusing on some features and delineating others based off of complete arbitrary nonsense. I don't know if this makes sense to you at all. I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No, I think I got you. Yeah, I think there are objective things and then there are subjective things. And like an objective thing, like let's take the example of President Kennedy, right? You can say objectively, President Kennedy did this. President Kennedy prevented the Cuban Missile Crisis. And you could also say President Kennedy planted the seeds for what eventually became the Vietnam War. You know, you can say President Kennedy was thought of by people of his generation as like a symbol of youth and of hope. But at the same time, President Kennedy also was a philanderer who cheated on his wife a lot. I mean, those are like objective things. You can look at history and say, okay, this definitely happened. That's different from saying President Kennedy was a great man or President Kennedy was a terrible president, or, you know, those are opinions. And I think a lot of times people think that one has to imply the other. And that if you look at someone like President Kennedy and you take a full stock of him and you say, yeah, you know, he was a good president and it was a tragedy how he died, but at the same time, you know, he had a troubled marriage and he had all these failures as an executive and he did all these things that maybe eventually led to bad results later on. So you can't really say he was a great president. Well, but that's just your opinion. You know, you're basing your opinion on the objective things, but it's still just your opinion. It's not an unequivocal fact that Kennedy was a great president or was a terrible president or was somewhere in between. Those very terms are subjective, you know. And it's the same thing as to tie it back into the Batman thing. Like there's a certain version of Batman that I prefer to other versions. That doesn't mean that my version is the best one. My version is the best one for me. Your version might be completely different than mine. The revelation I had as a younger person that made me sort of see how useful that was when I realized that I can still like your version, even if it's not my version. You know, that's like with the old Adam West Batman TV series. Completely not my version of Batman. If DC Comics came to me and said, hey, Steve, guess what? We're going to let you write a Batman comic and you can write it any way you want. And you have full creative control. My Batman would not be within 100 miles of Adam West's version of Batman. It would not be like that at all. But I still think that's a great version of Batman. I still think it's one of my favorite versions of Batman. I think it's one of the best versions anybody ever did, even though it's completely different than mine. And having that awareness that just because it's not how you would do it doesn't mean that it's bad was kind of a big deal for me, you know?
I just think that's kind of funny. Like you're telling me that if you were told to write a Batman comic, you wouldn't include little quips or little Batman dancing scenes.
I mean, I don't know. I might. I don't know. I mean, it would do, like when I watch that show, like I watched that old Adam West show, and I admire it, and I think like, man, some of that is so funny. Like, I wish I could write that and be like that funny. But at the same time, I mean, like when I get into Batman, it's all like, you know, the moral ambiguity and all the, you know, a lot of the more serious stuff that the show like made fun of. You know, the show, you know, Batman was so square and so straight. He was like more straight than the cops. You know, he was completely not that morally ambiguous vigilante thing that he became later on at all. And that's what makes it funny to me is like, you know, Frank Miller made such a big splash with Batman about with all this moral hand wringing about like, you know, what about the ethics of what he does, and is he above the law, and is he really any different than the criminals that he goes after? And in the 60s series, it was all just completely for a laugh, you know?
So obviously there's a lot, like I said, because there's a lot of different things that you do. I'm trying to get through all the different things at the very least that I watch your channel for. One of the other things you do is movie reviews.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that when it comes to criticizing movies, everybody has their own different method. Everybody has their own different things that they like to point out about movies. Either some people might focus more on the cinematography than they do like plot continuity or something like that. Like I don't care too much, so long as I can follow the plot, I'm fine. But if it looks like crap, I'm still not going. I just can't watch it.
Yeah.
So just I'm curious, like what is your way of analyzing a movie? Like what do you look for as far as what you value?
Well, the bottom line for me is did it provoke any sort of an emotional response in me? Did it get me like right here, you know? And if it did that, and it did that in the way that I think it wanted to, then chances are I'm going to think it's a pretty good movie, you know? Like a lot of the movies that I like, that I've talked about on my videos that a lot of people don't like, like Ang Lee's version of the Hulk, which I think is great and everybody hates, and like Superman Returns, which is like my favorite superhero movie ever, and a lot of people really hate that movie. It's because they move me. They move me emotionally. They hook me, like, and they just grab me and they move me emotionally, and that's why I love them. So for me, it's that, and it's, you know, if I can go back over the movie after I finished watching it, and I find plot holes, or I find inconsistencies, or I find things that were glossed over, that doesn't really bother me if I didn't notice it while I was watching the movie. Like, I understand that, you know, for most movies, there are going to be, and I know as a writer as well, having done it myself at a very limited level, but nonetheless, that sometimes there are bits that you have to sort of finesse. There are bits that you have to sort of, okay, you know what, I'm never going to find a perfect explanation for this, but here's where I need to get into this story, so let's just keep going. I understand that those things happen, you know, and it's not really avoidable a lot of the times. So as long as I don't notice it in the movie when I'm watching it, I don't care. Like, people can point out the plot holes in Superman Returns all day. I don't care, because I don't notice them when I'm watching the movie. You know, so that sort of stuff doesn't bother me. And my philosophy as a critic is a lot like what Roger Ebert was, which is, how well does a movie accomplish what the movie wants to accomplish? You know, and if I detect that a movie seems to be wanting me to think something that the movie isn't actually showing me, like, that's a big deal for me. That's kind of a deal breaker for me. If the movie is telling me that a given character is good and is heroic, but it hasn't shown me that this character is a good heroic person, but I get the sense that it wants me to think that to me is a sign of a bad film, you know. So there's a lot of stuff there, but that's basically it.
I think later on in Ebert's career, he ended up changing up his philosophy on reviewing movies, because he just turned into that cranky old man who just hated smut. You know what I mean? He's just like, it's just a teenage power male fantasy bullshit, because there's a dude with a gun in it. That's just,
yeah.
He's
I know.
All overboard.
But at the same time, he still gave. I mean, yeah, the one I really disagreed with, just to keep it in the comic book movies for a second, he gave a really negative review to the second Punisher movie, which wasn't nearly as widely seen as the first one, as the one with Thomas Jane in it. But I thought I think it was called Punisher Warzone, and I thought that was actually really good. I thought that was a really good Punisher movie, and Ebert gave it a really negative review. And I didn't really see eye to eye with him on that. But he also gave really positive reviews to movies that I thought were just, and like superhero movies that I just thought were terrible. Like he gave a positive review to Batman Forever, which I think is just dog shit.
I think that's a crime against humanity to do that.
Yeah. I think he gave a really good positive review to the Spawn movie too, and the Spawn movie I think is just terrible. So he didn't, like, in his old age, in his dotage, he didn't take to hating everything. But yeah, I mean, I think he got more sensitive to violence. You know, he had a much harsher attitude toward what he considered to be gratuitous violence in movies.
Probably why he gave a more positive review to Batman Forever, because that was sort of like that was the beginning of the deviation from the other two films, because there was such a dark feel to those two, and with Forever, they kind of changed it up a little bit. And to make it a little more campy, a little more kid friendly, that might have been like his view on, like, oh, finally they're not pandering to the emos anymore.
Yeah. But although at the same time, I mean, I think that's what a lot of people I think liked about Batman Forever. The people who liked it, you know, that it was like a lighter tone. But then again, Ebert also gave really positive reviews to the Nolan Batman films too, which were clearly not taking it in that direction at all. So, you know.
If I might just give a quick plug to the donation and the charity, we're sitting at $1,842. I think it's another $40 until we get Stuffy on, and then another $90 until Lundy takes a section from his erotic fan fiction and forces Steve Shives at gunpoint to read it. And just remember, I'm not going to judge that you have all of these written about your favorite superheroes. Batman clutches Robin in his muscly arms, shit like that. But
Hey,
just remember,
don't be knocking the Batman Robin movies, okay? Those have a lot of basis in truth. So
true. But remember, if we break 2,000, you're going to hear quite possibly the most awkward confession you have ever heard.
From the mouth of Father Peter O'Phil.
we've only got about a half hour to reach our donation goals for this hour. So anybody who can help us out as far as that's concerned, please give us a chance, give us a shot. Donate more. The more you give, the better you'll feel.
You'll be less of a shitty person.
And by the way, I'll go ahead and do this now since we're talking about donations. In the chat room, Microbloganism promised to give $10 if I would finish the rest of my beer. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a shot. Here we go.
Go, 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 go.
Okay.
Like a champ.
Whoa.
Like a champ.
Okay, and Pumpkin as the Irishman, give a max out of 10 for that. Bit of drinking there.
I'm going to say there was a lot of foam at the end, so maybe... I'm going to say 7, so... Oh no, when I say foam, I mean it's like, you didn't drink it quite right. I mean, we can't all be professional Irishmen.
I'm an American.
Yeah. Nobody's perfect.
It's been years since the college days where you had the beer bongs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, beer bong. I don't see the point of putting an obstacle between me and alcoholism. It's like, hey, it's like, here's my drinking game. I'll walk up to the bar, buy a beer, drink the beer, buy another one, continue that for the rest of the night until I lose the use of my legs. So, yeah.
All right, so that's going to be $10 from Microbloganism then.
Also,
so then that'll be $30 more until Stuffy. Why do I keep thinking he's Scruffy? I watch too much Futurama, I swear.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Also, there's people who can't figure out how to donate. Scroll down, click the link, and you're less of a shitty person if you give money.
There you go.
Like, just slightly less of a shitty person. Don't overdo it.
Also, a nice little link has been put in the chat bar with Shane Gorey, who went ahead and made it a nice little tiny URL for you.
Aww.
Isn't that nice? Hey.
Let's
so no
just
more
hope
excuses.
Yeah. I mean, for all you know, it could be hardcore porn, but hey, that's the fun with tiny URL.
All right. So one of the big things that you regularly engage in is sort of commenting on the current state of politics in the United States. Now, obviously, we have this huge thing that happened fairly recently with Hobby Lobby, with the SCOTUS decision. I'm sure you're familiar with all the details.
Yeah.
What exactly is your view on the situation as a whole? What's it like? There's a lot of people who are talking about the personhood status of corporations. There's a lot of people who are talking about the hypocrisy of Hobby Lobby and sponsoring things they also don't allow they don't provide for their employers. There's a whole bunch of other different things, and then there's also people just focusing on the law part about it. But what would be a decent summary of your view?
Well, I mean, that summary you just gave is actually a great way of putting it, because there's so much wrong with that decision. Like, there's so many different angles you can come at it from to disagree with it. Like, it does deal with corporate personhood, which I think is a really bad idea. It does deal with there's an anti-woman aspect to it, because the specific case dealt with birth control, and once again we have ostensibly a group of men telling women, "Oh, you're not allowed to have that. Sorry, we're not comfortable with that." That's a little troubling. But for me, the part that I really attached to most is the religious aspect of it, and the fact that you basically have a Supreme Court decision now that whether the justices intended it for this or not, and they did try to make it sound like, well, this is a limited scope. We're not meaning to set like a broad precedent, but they might not be able to help that. I mean, they've set this precedent where the religious beliefs of a particular group of people a particular class of people, people who are business owners, a tightly controlled corporation, can use their religious beliefs as a legitimate excuse for not obeying a law that everybody else has to obey. And when I take away all the other stuff that I just talked about, the women's issues and the corporate personhood and all that stuff, just on that basis alone, it boggles my mind to think that anybody, no matter how deeply religious you are yourself, whether your Christian beliefs are the guiding force behind your own life or not, why you would think it was a good idea to allow people to use their own religious beliefs as an excuse for exempting themselves from a law. And I cannot make that make sense in my head. If you're going to have a secular society where there is no established religion, where religious liberty means not just that people have the freedom to believe and to profess whatever they want, but also that people have the freedom to not be subjected to the religious views of other people against their will, that you would have this decision where you can use I'm sorry, I'm just not comfortable with those forms of birth control, so you don't get them. That just doesn't make sense to me. I can't make that make sense in my head, I
think the main issue I have is it's pretty much in the same vein as yours, and not even just because of the separation of church and state aspects and the problem of being subject to people's religious beliefs, but also the fact that the decision is based off of whether or not someone holds dearly to a belief or sincerely to a belief. How exactly, that's kind of my question. How exactly do you measure that? How do you tell that? How do you know somebody's not just going to say, I'm not going to follow this directive because I sincerely believe that I shouldn't have to because of some religious vagary of some sort? It just seems to be a bit of a cop-out that is not going to be able to be resolved because people can just say, I believe this. And then where do you go from there?
Well, yeah, and not only that, I mean, this case is a little bit different because, I mean, look, the birth control thing, even though I think birth control is something that women should be allowed to get if they want it, and I think it's horseshit that we treat it like a bonus feature of a health plan instead of as a basic part. But, hopefully the practical effect of this decision won't be that bad because the Obama administration has said they want to come up with some sort of administrative fix where maybe, the forms of birth control that are denied by Hobby Lobby can maybe be government subsidized so that people who want them will still be able to get them. It's just that Hobby Lobby won't have to actually help to pay for them. So hopefully there won't be like a huge practical effect felt by people. But imagine if this were imagine if this weren't birth control, if this were a much more serious medical procedure. Like what if the case was that a group of Jehovah's Witnesses who owned a business wanted to not have to cover blood transfusions in health insurance? Or what if it was Christian scientists who didn't want to provide health insurance for anybody at all because they don't believe in medical care? They just want to pray over the sick. I mean, I have a hard time believing that there would be enough people in the country, that there would be nearly as many people in the country as supportive of that decision as they are of this one, and because a lot of it is like people look at it through those other lenses that we talked about. They say, oh, well, women don't need birth control. If they want to have birth control, they can buy it themselves. So they can just not have sex. It's not that why should we have to pay for their birth control? There are other issues to glom onto. And if it were a much more cut and dry issue, if it were a much smaller minority of religious people trying to use their beliefs to excuse them from obeying the healthcare mandate, I think it would be a little bit of a different issue. And the thing is that if you go by the decision that the sincerely held religious conviction allows them to exempt themselves from paying for that birth control, then it kind of applies to all those other situations too. Like, it'll be interesting to see what the appeals process is over the next couple of years, to see what new cases will come up, to see if there will be, members of a Christian Scientist sect who will try to exempt themselves from the Obamacare healthcare mandate completely because they don't believe in healthcare. It'll be interesting to see how that happens and to see how long this decision actually stands. because it just seems so nuts to me on the surface that I have a hard time thinking like this can't possibly last that long, can it? Like people will see in a few years that this is crazy, that you can't possibly allow people to just exempt themselves from laws because of their sincere religious beliefs, right? Like I'm hoping kind of that's what happens.
One thing I found somewhat hilarious was I actually looked this up in a conversation I was having with someone else a while ago, and it turns out that the Hobby Lobby thing seems to actually break part of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It sprang into my mind at the time. I actually looked it up. In Article 25, the first part, it says, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care. It doesn't say what medical care, but considering that this is denying a form of medical care which could, it's basically denying, even in a small way, some form of medical care to a select group of people. So in a way, it is actually breaking the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So if people are trying to say, oh, well, it fits into the Constitution and all of this shit, which makes no sense to me because the First Amendment and whichever one it is deals with religion. I'm not American, so sue me. But it breaks the United Nations, which, as long as I'm still sober enough to remember, is the U.S. is indeed a part of. So, yeah.
Well
done, America.
That is a point that can be brought up. I think there will probably be a debate as to whether or not healthcare is supposed to include via the UN Charter birth control. I'm not 100% certain on that. I think it should be, obviously, because one of the things that always boggles my mind is when people say, "Why should we have to pay for your birth?" Like, why would you not? Why would you prefer that someone have a child that they can't afford and then end up having to go on welfare and having to receive public aid, and you'll end up paying so much more just because you didn't want to pay for them to have a pill? Like, that is the strangest thing to me.
And at that point, you're just cherry picking things anyway. Because I mean, when people say, I thought it was amusing when Obamacare first passed, and people were like, "Oh, why should I have to pay for someone else's health care?" Well, you realize if you have health insurance, or even if you don't have health insurance, and you pay taxes, I mean, you're doing that now. Mm-hmm. That's how insurance works. If you have health insurance and you pay your premiums every month, you are paying for every other person who has had to use their insurance for a medical treatment to have that medical treatment. That's the way insurance works. So this complaint of including all the women who have birth control, and I mean, and the other thing about the birth control thing is a lot of health plans until the Affordable Care Act passed, a lot of women, including my wife, got birth control covered under their health plans, but they had to get it for an off-label use. Like my wife used to get birth control to the official reason why she got it under her health plan was that it prevented acne. So somehow it's okay to get birth control covered by your insurance because it prevents acne, but you can't say, well, I'm getting it so I don't get pregnant, which is the intended use of the medication. It was insane. It's so stupid.
It's like when over here my dad decided he wanted to get a rifle to shoot rabbits because, he's farmer, doesn't like rabbits. OR. So he decided he would get a scope and a silencer, and he found out that you can't get a silencer to say, oh, I don't want them hearing and running, but you can to say, oh, it might hurt my ears even though I have this shot, which I keep in the gun cabinet right next to it, which is a hell of a lot louder. It's like, loopholes make no sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, that's why loopholes exist. That's the nature of loopholes, is that they're very weird to actually have. The actual usages of them don't make a whole lot of sense. But you have to do it anyway because contracts are a bitch.
Okay, so remember, everyone who's watching right now, if for some strange reason you're getting tired of Steve Shives, in which case You probably have no taste and should, just cry in a corner for a while. But if you donate $10, you will get Stuffy the bear. And everyone
Stuffy
loves
the dog. Stuffy the dog.
Stuffy the dog,
He doesn't really look like a dog, but it's hard to tell what breed he's supposed to be.
Stuffy, please just don't beat me again. I can't take it anymore.
Most stuffed animals don't look like the animals that they're supposed to portray.
Yeah.
I had a stuffed tiger that I named Hobbs when I was very young. It did not look anything like that. It's just, and really, when you read the old Calvin and Hobbes books, the comics, Hobbs does not look like a tiger.
No.
He looks like a strange striped bear, really.
I know. I still remember there's a guy I used to go to primary school with, which is, I suppose, grade school in America, where his dad had a stuffed bear. And so I went round to his house one day and he says, and this is my teddy bear, Snuggles. And it's this big, pissed off grizzly bear half snuggling. And I'm like, I have a teddy bear called Whitey. Please don't kill him.
I think your teddy bear could eat my teddy bear. So, speaking of Stuffy, I'm just kind of curious. I've kind of noticed this, but I want to be certain that I'm not just kind of psychoanalyzing what it should be.
Okay.
The usage of Stuffy in your videos, where you kind of talk to him about political issues and the like, isn't that, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're essentially doing there is you're trying to provide sort of the context of the inner dialogue of your analysis of a situation. Stuffy's kind of like a bit of an asshole, a bit of the asshole in you that's just like, no, you know what, fuck these people. And you're trying to portray the more sympathetic part, which is trying to understand the other side. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, well, I think you might be flipping the roles. I think Stuffy is usually the reasonable one. Stuffy is the one who is sort of, he has the more compassionate view and the more tolerant view. And either one of the other stuffed animals, either Toby Benson or me in those videos, because I'm usually an idiot in those videos, we're the ones taking like the more like, no, fuck those people, and Stuffy's the one who's sort of like, because Stuffy in the videos that I've done this past year, I've introduced the idea that Stuffy actually is on the board of directors of a charity. So Stuffy is like trying to make the world a better place, and he's stuck living in this house with me and with the other stuffed animals who just don't care. Who are just we're interested in our shit and our lives and what's important to us, and everything else is just kind of inconvenient that we have to even talk about this kind of thing.
True. I will always remember the line of, if you give money to them, I will light you the fuck on fire. I just love that line.
Yeah, my favorite Stuffy punchline, honestly, of all the Stuffy videos I've done so far. There was a video I did where one of the running jokes was that Stuffy was trying to talk to a suicidal friend on Skype, and I kept coming in and interrupting him to talk about just completely unimportant stuff compared to trying to talk a friend out of committing suicide. And at the end of the episode, after me and Stuffy work through whatever my shit is that was so important, I remember his friend, and I say, "Oh, hey, how's your friend?" And Stuffy goes, "Oh, he's dead." And that was the end. Like, it cuts to black, and that's it. And I just love that joke is just so dark. It's like, oh yeah, my friend who I was trying to help is dead because you wouldn't let me talk to him. Thanks a lot.
That just reminds me of an old Easter egg, and I think it's the intro too. It's like random numbers you can call. One of them's for the suicide hotline. Comes up on the phone, it's like nothing for a second, and then a single gunshot, and it hangs off. It's just like one of these random Easter eggs. Call up the suicide hotline and just bang.
It's awesome.
Okay.
Oh, that's what you meant by suicide hotline.
So ZZ Giant Awake says, I will donate another $20 on top of the first 10 that I've donated if Steve off air will watch and will give feedback on 2 movies on my channel. If that seems like an agreeable thing.
Sure, I'll do that.
All right. Real quick, ZZZ, if you could go ahead and give your channel in the chat.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and provide that to Steve, and I consider that a deal.
Apparently,
And
Marty has also donated $10, so
Yep. May we see Stuffy now?
Yes, I have to go get him.
$6 is
But
reached.
I will have to go and summon him. I'll be right back.
All right.
there's some elaborate ceremony with like pentagons or something.
Light a bunch of candles, speak Latin backwards.
We're just gonna see a goat like coming to the edge of the frame and then a spray of blood on the back wall.
There's gonna be a little bit of leftover blood on like Steve's shirt. He's just like, okay. All
So
right.
how did the goat sacrifice go?
How did the summoning ritual go?
He has agreed to appear on camera because it is for charity. So. Here he is.
Oh, hi Stuffy. You're looking.
Hi,
good.
everybody. Hello.
You're looking good.
Oh, thank you very much. You're looking good too.
Oh, thank you very much. So I hear that you're currently helping run a charity. Is that about right?
The
So-
Mid-Atlantic Food Bank.
The Atlantic Food Bank. I'm gonna have to check that out. So what kind of work do you do for your charity, Stuffy?
Oh, it's a lot of fundraising and it's a lot of just administrative work.
Oh,
I'm sure that the good people at Engineers Without Borders can relate. And everybody should donate to them for now. It's okay to donate to that one instead of to mine.
So,
Just for
Stuffy, are you willing to say that you will take all of the donations you've got for your charity and put them into ours?
No.
That would be such a charitable thing to do. Think of all the people you'd be helping.
I know, but it's actually, I don't want to be rude, but it's kind of presumptuous of you to even ask me that.
I suppose you're right, Stuffy. I am a horrible person.
But you're just trying to help people. I understand.
there are people who are being helped by both charities, Pumpkin. Money
Yes.
needs to be going to both. But for right now, we want to focus on.
Yes. Give to Engineers Without Borders. Everybody watching. Give some money to that fine charity if you haven't already. It's an excellent cause.
Could you wait? I have one really quick question. Considering that I believe it was your uncle who took one of Steve's kidneys.
That's
Could you
correct.
get him to take a lung or something so we can raise up some more money?
One of Steve's lungs?
Yeah, he's probably
I'll-
not using them that much.
Well, you can live with one lung, right? Well, I mean, I guess I could, yeah. We'll talk about it.
Thanks,
Have
Stuffy.
to draw up a contract,
You're
and all
welcome.
that kind of stuff. Got to show that there was consent in the deal, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. You
And
want it to
this
be, you want it
will-
to be legal. You don't want him to have to. You don't want him getting that lung back.
Yeah, and that will sort out my gambling debt with your uncle, right?
Well, I can't speak for my Uncle Floppy, but yes, I think I can say with confidence that it probably will, yes.
Because, losing Russian roulette is really awkward, but
Oh,
when
yes.
the bullet skims off your head, that's just really bad.
That's
then
why
you
I
have to-
moved away from that part of the family. That's not my sort of scene.
A well thought out decision, I might say.
Thank you.
So we have a question from the chat room for you, Stuffy. The question is,
Okay.
what do you have against wrestling and making people go to weddings?
I don't have anything against wrestling. I just don't like to watch it myself. I just don't find it entertaining. Which is unfortunate because Steve likes it quite a lot.
Do you end up having to watch a lot of wrestling because Steve watches it?
I do, yes. He recently subscribed to this thing. What is it? It's the WWE Network stuff. Yes, it's the WWE Network, and he watches wrestling all the time. So when I'm home, it's a lot of wrestling on TV.
Have you ever thought of maybe drawing conclusions from the fact that Steve likes watching semi-naked men hold each other in fairly awkward positions for long hours?
Oh, you mean that he's a homosexual?
Yeah.
I don't think that that's it. I think it's probably a lot more disturbing than that. It would be better if he was gay, because then at least he could have a positive, fulfilling relationship. But
Yeah.
as it is, he just kind of he has all these long conversations with stuffed animals while his wife sits around looking kind of bored.
There may be some problems there.
I think there are some issues at play, yes.
You think maybe Steve talks to you guys because maybe his wife isn't providing stimulating enough conversation?
Oh, I think that's giving Steve way too much credit.
Oh, how about, do you think that Steve is talking to you because there may be some personal issues between him and his wife? Perhaps he just can't get it up anymore.
If there are, then, well, yes, that's exactly it. If there are personal issues, I would say, and look, I don't mean to tell tales out of school, because Steve is one of my very good friends, and I love him very much. But yes, if there are any problems with him and his relationship with his wife, it's a safe bet that they're mostly his fault. She's a very patient lady.
She's prepared to work that wrist quite a while.
What is with that? What is selling me out? Like,
well, maybe he just doesn't want to get on your wife's bad side.
It's for charity. We're gonna have a conversation when this is over. It's fine. Sometimes I feel that you lack a bit of sympathy for your roommate there, Stuffy. Just a little bit. Well, just think, I've known him since he was 12 years old. It hasn't gotten any better.
Through the sock puppet years.
To me, I thought that would probably nourish a bit more of a understanding and loyal relationship rather than like immediately saying that everything is his fault.
I'm just trying to help him.
Yeah,
he can't change what he doesn't acknowledge.
But do you not think there might be... Perhaps it's because you're not forthright enough. I mean, he was mentioning a story earlier of you in a very nice way trying to help a friend of yours in a very difficult time over Skype. And he was just dealing with trivial shit. I can empathize there. Have you never thought to just tell Steve to fuck off every now and again?
It might have been better for my friend if I had, yes. Unfortunately, my friend is no longer with us. And I don't blame Steve for that, at least not directly. But I do think that maybe if I had been allowed to continue with my conversation with him, it might have come out a different way. So maybe I should have been more assertive that way. But Steve is just, it's hard to get mad at him because he's just so sad and pathetic.
See, I thought it was hard to get mad at him just because of his natural charm. But...
Well, he does have he is a charming fellow, but there's also, I mean, when you see him just sitting there on the couch watching wrestling and Superman all the time, it's like, how do you be mad at someone? He's 34 years old, for goodness sake. How do you get mad at someone like that?
Okay.
Okay.
Stuffy, would you like to help us wrap up the show, Stuffy?
I would.
You, Steve, and everyone.
Okay, yes.
All right. So that is this hour. That is the Steve Shive hour. We are currently at $1,927. We were $10 short of making Steve read erotic fan fiction. So you didn't have to do that.
I was willing. I was ready.
But at the very least, Stuffy came on and helped drastically improve the quality of the hour. Because Stuffy is awesome.
I have this strange feeling that Lundy was looking at his collection and Steve was looking at his collection. They were both thinking, which are we going to have to go with here? Because, you know, I have my Batman and Robin here, my Superman here.
If you're going with Batman, there's like 1,000 possible choices. So.
Oh yeah.
It's endless.
I mean, he is a billionaire playboy. Jesus.
It's true.
All right, so I'd like to thank Angry Pumpkin for co-hosting with me with this hour. And I'd like to thank Steve Shives for coming on for the charity for this hour.
Thank you, guys. Thank everybody who donated.
Thank you to everybody who donated for this hour as well. We're ever the more closer to our goal and our record. And when we reach our goal, by the way, that doesn't mean to stop donating. That just means that we reached a goal. It just means we have to make another goal. Anyway, this is Big Lundy. I will see you all again at 9 o'clock with Vinaloy. Until then, see you all later.